Hi, Wool Academy podcast listeners. It's lovely to have you tune in to another episode of the Wool Academy podcast of season 2, where I talk with Evan Thomsen from Flock Wool, and we take you on our journey of starting a wool trading company. And in this episode, we actually share how the Covid-19 pandemic has affected our business and has affected all of our lives. And what we did in order to adapt to the new situation. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So Evan, it's good to see you again, and thanks for your time today. So what's the date today?
May 12th, 2020.
So we've already been in quarantine and lockdown for around 9 weeks or so.
Yep, give or take where you are in the world, but yeah.
Yeah. So how has the pandemic actually affected the Flock Wool team?
It's prevented us from starting our operation in the way that we planned it. And so that's the story that every business is telling themselves right now. Our plan has gone awry. What's that? There's a Churchill quote, planning is good and plans are bad, or something like that, so you need to go through the planning process, but, you have to be, willing to adapt and or at least accept the inevitability of adaptation, given events, and then particularly given extreme events, or we could actually call this, a fat tail event, statistically speaking. That this is definitely an anomaly, so you have to be able to operate around that, or at least because it's a rare occurrence, but the impacts are so significant, and so that's where we all are, and you can't really fight against that. What it means for us, we have our plan was to start in shearing season. We're a wool company. When do you start operations? Shearing season. So that's when you get your wool, is when the sheep are shorn. And you can't change the seasons. Sheep are shorn at a time for a reason. Winter is done, we're coming into summer, get the wool off the sheep. So there's the elementary answer to that, right? I mean, well, we don't need to be more technical than that, do we? That's the reality. And so in Albania, that starts in May, and we missed a lot of shearing. Fortunately, some farmers shear throughout the course of May, so there's going to be a lot that we've missed. But there will be farmers shearing in the later portion of May, which is when now our collection operation is slated to begin, based upon the opening up, stages within Albania. So yeah, that's been the main impact, and the result on the back end is that our timeline and our expectations, to our partners and to our customers is going to be about 2 months late. But that's reality. And this is our first year of operation. So it's we're being born, our company is being born within the pandemic. So from my standpoint, even though it's upsetting that our plan, we just couldn't do it at all. And that we didn't get the perfect timeline or whatever. It's also the type of thing where it's if we get through this and we still have a successful year and we're able to achieve, our one container mission, right? One container, get it to the US, validate the market, that type of process. If we're able to achieve that, it'll be quite an achievement from my perspective. And it'll be the type of thing where, we can maybe even be more optimistic about the future and more encouraged by what we may be able to do in the years to come.
And my husband and I, we always, how you have these sayings between you, your spouse and yourself. And so one of them is stick to the plan. But then I think at the same time, you do have to be always willing to adapt the plan as well.
Well, you are German.
Yes, we are. but I think also at Flock Wool, we are sticking to the plan. It's just that we're being flexible and when it's happening, how things are going to happen, but we still have our goal.
But there are more adaptations though too. So our general cash flow and liquidity was exposed to higher degrees of market volatility, and so so that meant there were added restrictions upon our liquidity. And what has been our response to that? Plus the fact that there are increased global shipping costs, and there's less shipping and trade internationally going on right now. So that has put us in a bind for getting some of the equipment we needed at the very beginning. How are we responding to that? We're literally building our own wool press with local source materials rather than exporting it from abroad. And so that is part of our response, both because we've kind of had to look at alternatives, but at the same time, we're able to source and create something on our own, which makes us more resilient and durable to shock events in the future. What are we doing with wool packs? Same thing. We're finding a local maker that is able to make nylon packs according to our specifications. So now we have a local supply source, and it's for a better price. So those are good adaptations that it kind of pushed us into that we were never looking at before. We had, okay, we're going to get them from this supplier, we're going to get it from that supplier. But so we can't operate. What are we going to do? Well, let's spend our time finding different suppliers. Is there anything local? Can we do anything more creative there? Can Albie use his mechatronic engineering degree to any use? Oh, hey, great. That would be perfect for building a wool press, actually. So those are really positive things as well. So yeah, like the strategic theory of the plan hasn't fundamentally changed. It's the timeline is the main thing that's changed. But at the same time, we have dramatically looked at alternative options for where we are supplying resources, and what type of a cost structure we are able to take in this initial phase. So it's maybe a little bit more of a modification to the plan.
Yeah, but I think that's also what I quite kind of even enjoy, that there are these positive side effects of this terrible pandemic. That maybe you said that it makes us more creative, and it allows us to, like, for example, this podcast, we have maybe now more time to actually sit down and talk with each other. I've been able to take more time to actually start posting more regularly on our Instagram account. And I see that also in other businesses that I work with, that all of a sudden they have these creative ideas and come up with new solutions. So I think that's something that we can maybe learn from this, and as you say, maybe become even stronger, and maybe keep that as a learning in mind, that okay, how can we actually do this differently even if we're not challenged by a global pandemic? Yeah.
Well, I mean, they're two constant and like endogenous forces within every environment: stability and chaos. Period. And they both have their positives and their negatives. You need some stability. If you have to question everything all the time, then you're just going to be exhausted and like be dead by the end of the day, right? But if you're too stable and the structure is too solid and you can't move, like, well, obviously your structure is not perfect, and then like, the basic natural properties of entropy kind of function everywhere. So like, it's going to decay and hollow out over time. And, the way that you remain durable into the future is by having a multivaried, stratified way of injecting random chaos into the future and finding new opportunities and looking at things differently. And you can't really predict that, right? Stability is the predictive function. Okay, I'm stable. I have a multivariate, or I have a single varied linear analysis and a Gaussian distribution of how I look at the world. That's stability. And then it's like, okay, well, simultaneously chaos is functioning. And that's going to come with a different set of well, it's almost like meta models. You can't model chaos, and so you have to I'm stealing 100% from Nassim Taleb here, but you have to mine for randomness, and like, so, well, okay, so make the best of the random volatile situations as you can is, I think, the appropriate response, and that's what I think we've done. Yeah, and I mean, so maybe let's talk a little bit how we each have been affected. So actually, when the pandemic really started to affect most of the countries, and countries were going into lockdown, you were actually in Australia for a business trip. So tell us a little bit about
that interesting journey you had?
Yeah, so late February when, I mean, it was mainly only in China in late February. At that stage, I mean, it feels like ancient history now. How much every day has been, how many changes almost happen every day in every country. But yeah, we had a trip planned to Australia for 1 month, for months. That was already on the books. We planned that back, last year. So yeah, that was going to happen. And so late February is when it was just beginning. Like airports they weren't screening anybody. They were just asking you a question. Have you been to the Wuhan region of China? That was what we were asked, right? And it's like, no, we haven't been there. Okay, we'll move along then, right? So yeah, but we go from there. The only thing that happened, we stopped over in Singapore and we had a long layover, and right when we walked in the hotel, they took a temperature gauge and boom, right on the forehead, and so it's like, okay, that's, how things are here, I guess. But that became how things were everywhere within like 2 weeks, right? So now we're in Australia and we're there, throughout almost all of March, and each day almost, and the country is changing policy, laws are changing in virtually every country. Businesses are starting to shut down, airports are starting to shut down, countries are starting to close their borders to certain types of travel, restriction after restriction. So that was just happening over time. Meanwhile, I'm sitting down with some of your friends from Schneider, having lunch,
learning about wool, yeah.
and talking to them about what we're doing in Albania, and they gave us some lovely merino wool. We have it in a bag. So actually, that's probably, yeah, I'm not allowed to transport merino wool. I don't have merino wool from Australia. But yeah, so that's what was happening. And so how it affected literally my wife and I's livelihoods, or our home, was Albania shut its borders while we're in Australia. Our flight was canceled. We had no way to get back to our home, to our things, to the life that we had in Albania. And so we had given very limited choices and a lot of unknowns. We were like, well, we're going back to the US now, and that's it. We had already planned on moving back to the US in the nearish future, but that got expedited. So that, that's our personal situation. And then I know for Albie and Gertie, the restrictions in Albania have been very, very strict, like basically no movement. You can't go from town to town, city to city. It's not just nobody in the country or out of the country. It's, restrictions city to city. Almost all businesses completely shut, not allowed to operate at all. It was only like, I think, grocery stores and pharmacies that were open for almost a 2-month period. So yeah, that's been our personal situation and how it's impacted, our team in Albania, and then and obviously for the business.
Yeah, but from what Albi kept telling us is that wool growers in Albania, they were less restricted, so they were still able to shepherd their sheep, take care of their sheep, move from city to city as necessary.
In fairness, wool growers practice social distancing by definition.
All day, every day. Yeah, because it's true. They stay with the sheep in the field in very cold conditions. When we visited them, we were actually freezing.
In January.
So they are quite isolated when they are taking care of their sheep. That's true. So they were probably quite safe outside. But yeah, so but in a way that was good for them, that they could just continue taking care of their sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for me, I always said nothing much has changed because I anyways work from home. So I just kept working from home and just leaving my home less frequently. Yeah. And I only had my husband join me at my desk because he also started doing home office at some point. But otherwise it has affected us that we did plan on meeting now in May in Albania for our first shearing season. So unfortunately
you can't come now.
Can't be there, no. So Well, but so this is what happened, and you mentioned also how the pandemic has affected different areas of our business, like the logistics, shipping, shearing season. But how do you see like long-term effects? I mean, I know it's difficult. Nobody knows really what's going to happen, but so if you don't know what will happen, how do you think we should, plan if we can't plan?
I mean, obviously, like, I hesitate to make too many predictions. Everybody right now, everybody has an opinion and everybody's making a prediction. You can go onto every news site and see 20 different ones, right? So about the overall economy and what this means. But I think there's definitely some things that are positive, but there's other things that are potentially quite negative. So let's start with the positives. Sustainable resources will have a higher demand premium. Single-use plastics have gone up, but maybe things like clothing and things, things that wool goes into, look at their competitors. Okay, what do the competitors have as different from wool? Well, generally they don't last as long. The poly-based products are going to be, they're not going to last as long. They're not going to hold their shape as long. They're going to need more washing, more cleaning, just for clothing. If we look at, carpets and rugs, kind of the same story. Artificial products are going to wear out faster. They're not going to have as high of a quality. And then in addition, the focus on kind of the intersection of sustainability and overall health, hey, what product helps clean and filter the air and make your environment more beautiful? Wool, flood your house with wool, and your air is going to be better, right? So there's potential demand uptick on, a type of product like wool, and, from clothing to carpets and rugs to other forms of manufacturing, where it could have some benefits. Now, some of the downsides. And I think there's more downsides. Now, whether that means that they're more in proportion, I'm not sure yet. One of the downsides is going to be wool is a more expensive product. So at least in the short term, demand for wool is likely going to go down because economies have been really strained. So more people are going to be cost conscious. Even if they want that long, they might be willing to invest more in those longer lasting products. Is wool going to be the first on their list? I don't know. Probably not for most people. So cost consciousness for a lot of people, a lot of consumers have really been hit. Governments have been hit. Businesses have been hit. Are they going to be willing to invest in wool? Probably fewer of them, versus a more cost-effective alternative. Another negative is going to be the potential questioning of where are we getting our resources from. So one of the aspects to do with medical equipment in so many countries has been the massive uptick in demand, simultaneous with a reduction in production. And if you're not producing locally, you have way less control as a country over your strategic resources. Before, what did countries consider strategic resources? Well, medical equipment wasn't really on that list. We're probably going to be adding it into the future, but yeah, so a strategic resource used to be something like, metals, for military purposes, obviously, energy resources and stuff like that. So that's probably going to change. More things are going to get put on that list of a strategic resource for more national, within the borders type of production. Is wool going to be put on that list? Probably not. So that can kind of question some things like, well, so there's still going to be general global demand. However, it's likely that more people are going to be thinking about buying locally. So how does that impact our ability to export our wool? Because we're not looking at Albania as our market. We're looking at the world as our market. Carpet manufacturers external to Albania. Maybe in the long term, Albania could be a full manufacturing country with that product. But at least for what we're able to do, not now. So yeah, I see a greater quantity of negative potentialities but how that will actually impact the demand of our product 6 months, 1 year, 5 years from now. I'm not entirely sure how that stacks up with what I think will be an increase in demand for more sustainable, more natural, and more health conscious products.
Yeah, I think I also don't know what the future will be, but I think there are different topics that we can now maybe look out for and educate ourselves more. So I think I see a lot of articles right now linking the coronavirus with like kind of posing the coronavirus as a catalyst for sustainability. Kind of, let's take this as an opportunity to turn our industry around. And I think because people saw that all of a sudden it is possible to make a huge change, to put legislation in place that is immediately effective. So if that is possible for this pandemic situation, it should also be possible in regards to climate change and sustainability, making industries more sustainable. So I think that's one aspect we should look into and like read more about and see how can this be a game changer for sustainability within the textile industry in general. And the second thing I forgot right now, so I don't know what it was, but yeah. So regionalism. That there I go. So the second thing, I think, so yeah, we're not maybe looking right now at a selling market in Albania, but I think potentially that Europe might be a region that could be interested in sourcing more locally. Or regionally. So I think that's another trend of what you said, that how are we producing things, where are we producing them, and how dependent do we want to be on global trade. So that's maybe a topic we also need to look into, like how are these dynamics changing in favor or against us. So yeah, I think that's two things, and maybe that's also what the last question I wanted to discuss, and when we touched upon it a little bit earlier, like, okay, how can we make use of this time? How can we, make the best of this, so we can, keep an eye on topics being discussed and how, learning from them. And I mentioned earlier, I'm using the time to create a lot of content. So yeah, and then we don't have to put it out there all right now, but in the long term, then we have a lot of content stacked up to help us with our marketing in the long term. Do you have some more ideas how we can use the time at the moment?
Well, some of the things that we've already done, like re-examining our cost structure, because we've kind of been forced to, and so that's put us into a more creative space where we're actually, I think, doing things better and more cost effectively. So that's exciting, and I think it adds to our story. Like, we're going to be building our own wool press. Like, that's great. We'll be sourcing our wool packs locally, so that's part of what we want to do with the Flock story. I mean, our aspirational goal is we rekindle the wool industry in Albania. We're not just trying to get a few containers on a boat. Like, the objective is to, really reestablish this industry, because it used to be there. There's nothing broken about the potentiality of wool within Albania. It was just, very negative political conditions 3 decades ago, so sometimes these negative events like Corona or like, political issues do create massively negative problems that last for decades, and so, well, let's make sure that this doesn't happen here. And so, part of that is, okay, hey, let's start integrating our company into the local economy. Okay, they're not our buyer, but our local economy can supply our stuff. How can they do it? Creatively. Make something that they haven't, that they're already making, but in a slightly different way. There's already machinery for farming. There's already presses for farming. All right. A few different dimensions, a few different tools, and bam, it's a wool press now. There's already nylon bags. There's already, nylon wool textiles in general. Okay, we'll now make it these dimensions specifically for the baling of wool, and there we go, and then obviously using shipping locally and, and working with, the port in Durrës, and not finding any alternative means and stuff like that. So yeah, that's where we're really changing our supply focus to a very, very local focus. Now, in terms of the regional strategy, there are some limitations right now for us because Albania is not part of the EU. Okay, yeah, it's closer, but still it's, the difference between, I don't know, like, Germany and Belgium and America with respect to Albania is probably close to zero with respect to legislation, with respect to economics, trade policy. So where that is for us right now, probably limited into the future. Albania is seeking ascension to the EU. That could very well change, and that'll be, I think, a great opportunity for us. But yeah, right now I see limitations there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think that's a topic we should dive into in our next episode, talking a little bit more about Albania. But we probably would have done that earlier, but we thought talking about the pandemic is more timely at the moment. So
yeah.
we kind of squeezed that in. But yeah, if that's okay with you, I would like to take up that topic in our next episode when we talk more in detail about Albania.
Definitely.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Evan, for your time. Speak soon.
All right, we'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Evan Thomsen from Flock Wool. And if you want to find out more, head on over to the show notes at elisabethvandelden.com/107. And of course, there's also more information on the Flock Wool website at flockwool.com. Talk to you again in about 2 weeks' time, and I hope to see you then. Thank you and bye for now.